Totally.
Excellent. All right, moving on. This one's a mouthful. All right. We are going to transition from kind of a youth and like our formal idea of what we would think of as an athlete. We think of like youth athletes, middle school athletes, high school, pro athletes all around. I want to talk about non-traditional athletes like me, Eric, and like you now.
It's like me
right?
now. Yeah, me as well.
So working adults, we want to compete and train in their sport of choice. Like a caveat I'll put on this is after college, many of the people listening, you can recognize, or even high school for some, or even middle school for some, there are very few sports that we're called out to play. You're not on teams anymore using your body to physically do anything. No one cares what your score was. So in comes the rise of marathons, 5Ks, triathlons, mud runs, Spartan races. Now, like everyone's playing pickleball. Like there's these things are arriving because there is a force inside of us that it like the finish lines and the opportunities die away well before our interest and our physical need for that goes away. So you're left in this kind of vacuum where it's like, all right, athletes. When you think about athletes, everyone, you've been thinking of this, like, oh, I'm not an athlete. I sit at a desk all day. I drive a truck all day. I stand behind here all day. I talk to people all day. I'm on doing Zoom calls all day long. But I think shifting gears in a lot of ways, the best leaders that I work with actually think and treat themselves like athletes. They have mindset coaches. They have meditation practices, breathing practice. They have all of these things that you would expect an elite athlete to do. They get paid money to be an athlete because they're managing energy, stress, hormones, all those things that I know that you and I talk about a lot. So what about it? What about them that they still want to compete? And how is sports performance training maybe different for them than it would be for a youth where it's like, I'm not going to be doing that. Well, what would I be doing? Yeah. And again, I know I'll caveat that depends on what I'm training for. Yeah. But just in general, and you can even dance around the different type of things that we've seen people training for that you've worked with.
Yeah, I think one of the big things that you're going to see in an older adult athlete is going to be stress management, right? Management of overall stresses. And to kind of, before I dive into this, counteract or talk about what you said, I sit at a desk all day. I'm a truck driver all day. If you've ever heard of a company called Nike, their co-founder, Bill Bowerman, he once said, if you have a body, you're an athlete, right? And so anyone if you're human, like you're an athlete of life, right? And so when it comes to training for someone that does have a sport we're working for, right? There are definitely things that are different, but there's also a lot of overlapping variables. One of the biggest ones you're going to see, like I said, stress management. At the end of the day, when you go to sleep, the body doesn't say, okay, I'm just going to recover from my training stress over here, but I'm going to leave work and family stress for another day. And we'll do that tomorrow, but then you go and train tomorrow, and you can't stack those for very long, right? So, when we sleep is going to be a big part of when you recover from stresses. So sleep management, I think, falls right into that. I think paying attention to those stresses are really important. I think the other thing that I talked about is lower emphasized in the youth side, but needs to be highly prioritized more in an adult realm is, your warm up and your down regulation, preparing the body for the demands it's about to ask. I like to use the analogy a lot. It's like a car, right? You see muscle cars from the 50s and 60s that still look and run beautifully, but how much maintenance and work have they had on them regularly throughout the years? And how much time and energy has been put into those to make sure that they still look and run the way that they do. And we see a lot of those effects in the human body. Huberman and Galpin actually talked about this. A lot of the things that we think deteriorate as we age, we're actually starting to see you can contribute all of those things specifically to lack of training them. The first thing they talk about that you start to see as you age is speed and power. As you start to often see in the 30s and really into the 40s, in aging athletes, speed and power goes down. When's the last time you see people, you saw multiple people over the age of 30 sprinting or max effort jumping or doing a heavy Olympic lift, right? But they haven't set the base to do that. If they go out and try to do that, they're not ready. So that's where did I, one, prepare my body for the demands I'm about to ask of it? Two, do I actually have the tissue tolerance to do that demand yet, right? Like, have I laid the foundation to bulletproof the body enough that it can be resilient enough to handle that stress, right?
Yeah, well, I think you used some language matters.
Correct.
And I think when you think of non-traditional athletes, they call it like, I'm going to go exercise. I'm going to go work out.
Yep.
I'm going to get a good hard workout in. They don't use the language of train. Like, and I think that's a mindset
exercise.
shift. You know what I mean? Where I'm going to train today, which means that what I'm doing today is for something else.
Yep.
Instead of, I'm just going to go beat myself into a mud puddle. I'm going to go run as long as I can today. I'm going to go. And I think, things have come a long way in running. Like where you see like, there's like maps, there's kind of periodization tables for like when to taper, swimming. Like in sport, you see that, but it's like the middle of the bell curve.
Yep.
Out there that's like, I think I could do something again, or I should do something. First of all, I'd tell you, yes, you should,
100%.
because it's going to help you in a lot of places. Per what Eric said, like even managing stress in like relationships, home, like work-life stress, it's going to help you have more energy, confidence, endurance, resilience, grit, all these things. You're like, I wish I could be like that. You totally can. But like, I think that going back to where I pin that is like the language that you use.
Yeah.
And being around people that use that language probably doesn't hurt either. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, kind of going to what you adding on to what you just said about go do something, I do keep saying, do you have the ability to do this? Do you have the ability to do this? Well, that's also the point of training, is to build the ability to do that. It's just, can you handle the amount of volume, the intensity you're pushing that volume at? Can I handle that much frequency? How often I'm doing it? Those are all variables you got to pay attention to when we're adding stresses in, because that is the point of training. And really anything, when it comes to building resiliency, grit, things like that, it's, am I putting myself into a challenging situation that stresses me, that I can come out on top of to create a positive adaptation? And if I go to sleep and I have that kind of break time or that down regulation time from that, neuroplasticity comes out, as Huberman says, and, it allows us to adapt and become better at that stress we just faced. And so, that is the point of training, is to be able to build more tissue tolerance, to be able to build more range of motion, more strength through that range of motion, all these things. You just can't go out balls to the wall and do all of it right at once, 100%. You got to figure out where your starting point is. You got to do some self-assessment, especially if you're doing this on your own. You got to find, you can go to Google and find all sorts of assessments online. Physical therapy ones are going to be a little more joint by joint. We do a little bit of both, coordination through some movement, but then we also do some joint by joint that we want to see. To make sure, can you handle the things that we're commonly going to do in here? And if you can't, then we need to work on that first before we can start really focusing on the bigger things that you want to emphasize.
And you bring up a couple of things. One of my beliefs is, and I'd be hard pressed to find someone who probably would refute this, although it's the internet, you can find anybody to refute anything, I believe that someone who's getting back to training or has never done it needs a coach far more in a lot of cases than youth athletes do.
Yeah.
Youth athletes are more durable, resilient. They can get away with eating anything. If you have kids and you're listening to this, you know what I'm talking about. Like, how did you do that? Yeah. Like, how did you come back from like that training? Whereas you get older, the risks in starting to do these type of things, to sprint, power, like all the things we talked about, seem to be higher. Like the risk reward is higher, particularly early on. So I think meeting with a coach, like whether it's like wherever you're at and listening to this, it's a great beginning assessment. Once you pin down, what are you motivated to do? So sports performance is, there's a performance output I'm looking for. Once you know, I want to do a blank, that's for you to decide. But meeting with a coach to get some kind of assessment and talk through where you're at, even if you pay 1 or 2 or 3 times just to know where you're starting from, then you go online, then you go with the program somewhere else. Now you're at least like, all right, I got a good general sense of awareness, physical awareness, like where do I need to move? And then you could come back to that same coach for even reassessment if you never darkened the doorstep of their gym before.
And I think, I can play devil's advocate to both sides of this. I think from a youth standpoint, that neuroplasticity I talked about, the brain's ability to wire and coordinate things, it's much more receptible at a younger age. And so they can see faster adaptations, and you're going to see coordination oftentimes pick up faster in someone because they've never been taught poorly. Naturally you watch babies and little kids, they squat well. And part of that's how their body's designed, right? They have a bigger head, gives them better counterbalance. But at the same time, like we have all these natural movements we do, but we stop performing them as we age and we lose the capacity and ability to do them. And so, you teach a youth athlete. So teach a youth athlete really, really well from the beginning. I think that's just as important as an adult athlete, but I think it takes fewer sessions with them more often than not than what you need to follow up with an adult athlete because of the more cumulative stresses that have been placed on the body over decades, the small little injuries. Dr. Kelly Starrett, he's one of the leading experts in physical therapy and around performance training and strength training. He was actually one of the first early CrossFit affiliates. His company's the Ready State as well, if you want to look into him. But I've been listening to him a lot lately, and he asks every speech he does, whether it's 5 people or 500, how many of you deal with pain? And at every place he goes, 98 to 99% of them raise their hand, right? So pain's normal. Pain doesn't mean it's a problem. Pain is a warning sign, so it doesn't mean something's wrong. It just means that you may be headed for something wrong. It's a warning sign. And so, with adults, you start running into that higher risk because most of them are going to deal with more pain or more cumulative pain that prevents or restricts them from doing things.
Awesome.